Okay, so a quick fire lesson on photosynthesis. We're going to look at three things. We're going to look at the word equation for photosynthesis. We're going to look at the symbol equation for photosynthesis. We're going to talk about how a leaf is adapted to carry out photosynthesis. There'll be points during this lesson where you should pause the video, have a go at answering the questions. Once you've had a go at answering the questions, restart the video again and make sure you got the question right. So, first question is, what is photosynthesis? What actually is it? Well, we need to have a look at that. So photosynthesis is the process that plants use to make their own food. It's how plants create the stuff that they need in order to grow. Where does photosynthesis take place? Well, it takes place in the leaves of the plant and other green bits of the plant, but mainly in the leaves. What do plants need to create their food? Well, what they need to create their food is carbon dioxide, water, and energy from the sun. Now, this is light energy. The light energy could, of course, come from lamps, but most normally plants get their energy from the sun, from that light energy there. What kind of food do plants make? Plants make glucose. Glucose is a carbohydrate. One of the products of photosynthesis is glucose. What else is produced? The other thing that's produced, of course, is oxygen, which is considered a waste product of photosynthesis, but of course is useful to us in respiration. It's also useful to plants who do respiration as well. So I'd like you to have a go at this. Again, you can pause the video to do this. I want you to write a paragraph in your own words describing what photosynthesis is. You should make sure to include these things. What is photosynthesis for? What is used? So what are the reactants in the reaction for photosynthesis? What is created? What are the products? Where does it take place? And where does the energy for the reaction come from? So let's answer the question. Photosynthesis is the way which plants create their food. It's the way they create glucose, which they then use in their respiration. They use it to build themselves up. The reactants for photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and water. What's created are oxygen and glucose. It takes place in the leaves and the other green parts of the plant, anywhere that has cells that contain chloroplasts, which have the chemical chlorophyll inside them. And the reaction's energy comes from the light energy from the sun. It can, of course, also come from other places that can provide light energy, like lamps and so on, but generally speaking, from the sun. Right, so word equations. We're going to be writing photosynthesis as a word equation. But first of all, we need to work out what a word equation actually is. There may not be something that you've come across before. It may be something you have, but let's recap it anyway. So in a word equation, on the left-hand side of a word equation, we include what is being put together. We call these the reactants, the things that are being reacted together. We have an arrow in this particular type of word equation, and above that, we put the type of energy being used. In the case of photosynthesis, that would be light energy. On the right-hand side, we have what is being created. So I have a bit of an example for you. What is the word equation for chips? So the word equation for chips would be something along the lines of potatoes plus oil plus salt. And then we have this arrow, and above the arrow we put heat energy, and that creates chips. Now the reason we have an arrow instead of an equal sign, I often see people putting down an equal sign instead of an arrow in a chemical equation like this. That's to indicate that the reaction would occur in only one direction. So we take potatoes, oil and salt, we put them together with a bit of heat energy and we make some chips. But while we can turn raw potatoes into chips, we can't turn chips into raw potatoes. So the arrow tells us that the direction of the reaction is irreversible. We can't go the other way. So the word equation for photosynthesis. What we're going to need to do is, first of all, say what is being put together. So what is being put together? Carbon dioxide and water. And what's being created? Well, the thing that's being created is glucose and oxygen. And what type of energy is being used? Remember, we're going to put that on top of the arrow we've got there. Type of energy is going to be light energy. So that's our word equation. Carbon dioxide plus water. Bit of light energy thrown into the mix, we get glucose and oxygen out the other side. But we also want to be able to do this as a symbol equation, so not just as a word equation, but also as a symbol equation. So we first of all need to know what are the symbols for these various things. So carbon dioxide, CO2. Symbol for water, H2O. Symbol for oxygen, skipping glucose for now, the symbol for oxygen, O2. And the symbol for glucose, this is one that you may not know. The symbol for glucose is C6H12O6. So we just need to put all those things together into our chemical equation. So in place of carbon dioxide, we're going to put CO2. In place of water, we're going to put H2O. In place of glucose, we're going to put C6H12O6. And in place of oxygen, we're going to put O2. This, though, is unbalanced. In order to balance an equation, we need to have the same number of atoms on each side. So on the left, we've got 1 carbon, for instance, but on the right, we've got 6. On the left-hand side, we've got 1, 2, 3 oxygens. On this side, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 oxygens. On the left, we've got 2 hydrogens. Over here, we've got 12 hydrogens. So we're going to need to do some balancing to make sure that what is on the front is the same as what's on the back. Otherwise, we're going to be violating the law of conservation of mass. You need to have the same amount of stuff at the start as you have at the end. To balance this equation, maybe you could have a go at doing it yourself. To balance this equation, you need to remember that it is the devil's equation. This is the equation of the beast. Respiration and photosynthesis are balanced using the numbers 6, 6, 6. So I always think of this as the equation of the beast. CO2, H2O, and O2 all get a 6 put in front of them. So 3 6s, 6, 6, 6. The only one that doesn't get a number and put in front of it is glucose, C6H12O6. And the easy way to think about that is it's already got a whole bunch of stuff in there. So we don't need to add another number to the front of it. The C6H12O6, though, notice all those numbers are divisible by 6. So this really is the equation of the beast. Loads and loads of 6s popping up in photosynthesis. And also, if you're looking at respiration, it balances in the same way. Photosynthesis takes in light energy. So we need to know, does this make it endothermic or exothermic? It's taking in energy rather than giving it out. So does that mean it's endo or exo? Well, let's have a look at what endothermic and exothermic actually mean. So the thermic bit means energy or heat energy. The exo, you may have heard this before in an exoskeleton, or even better, a word that you definitely will have heard of before, is the word exit. When you go out of a building, you go out through the exit. So exo bit means to give out. So exothermic means to give out heat energy. Energy is being given out in an exothermic reaction. Endo, you may have heard of endoskeleton or something like that, which is a skeleton on the inside of your body. An exoskeleton is a skeleton on the outside of your body. Endo, somewhere where you may have seen those first 2 letters before, is in the word entrance. We use an entrance to go into a building. So endothermic takes in energy. Endothermic takes in heat energy. So because photosynthesis is taking in light energy, that must mean that it is endothermic, because energy is going in rather than coming out. Right, last bit then. Describe how a leaf is adapted to carry out photosynthesis. This is our last learning objective for this short lesson. So we need water, carbon dioxide, and light energy in order to do photosynthesis. The more you can get of that as a plant, the more successful you're going to be at producing your food, producing glucose and the byproduct of oxygen. In GCSEs, you're often asked about how something is adapted to its function, which essentially just means, why is it good at its job? So when we say, how are leaves adapted to help plants carry out photosynthesis, what we mean is, why are leaves good at their job? 6 things I want you to write down. Okay, so the 6 things that you need to get down are these. Leaves are broad, and we're going to explain why these are important in a second. Leaves are broad, they're thin, they have chlorophyll, they have vessels or veins inside them, they have air spaces, and they have what are known as guard cells. These are the 6 things you need to get down for why leaves are adapted well for photosynthesis. When we say broad, we mean that they have a big surface area. This means that a lot of light can fall on them. The wider a leaf is, the more light will strike it. Leaves are very thin, and this is because it provides a short distance for the gases, carbon dioxide, to diffuse in, and oxygen to diffuse out. Leaves are packed with chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the chemical that you find in chloroplasts, which is the organelle, the little sort of bit inside the cell where photosynthesis takes place. They have a lot of chlorophyll in them, especially on the upper surface, that allows them to absorb a lot of light energy. Those vessels, those veins, and you can see them on the leaf there, are for bringing water up from the roots and taking glucose to the plant. Glucose, the sugars, the food that is created by a plant is all created in the leaves, so it then needs to be taken from the leaves to the plant to make the plant grow, or they might store it, that kind of thing. And the two vessels that they use for that are the xylem and the phloem. The way to remember which one does which is looking at that word phloem. Phloem is the one that takes the food created by photosynthesis. So there's lots of F's there. Phloem, photosynthesis, food. So that's where the glucose, the food that the plant has made via photosynthesis, is taken. And the other one, xylem, which is the one that carries the water up from the roots. I like to always think as well that xylem starts with an X, and I always think about characters in old-fashioned cartoons. When the characters died, they often have X's over their eyes. Xylem, of course, are dead cells. They're not living cells. The air spaces are the bits that allow the CO2 and the O2 to diffuse in and out, and those are known as stomata, those holes on the underside of the leaves. And the guard cells are the ones that open and close to allow or stop gases from getting in and out. So quickly to recap then, the last bits we need to know, these are the main things about photosynthesis, at least the introduction to it. The word equation is carbon dioxide plus water. Put in some light energy and you get glucose and oxygen. The chemical equation is 6CO2 plus 6H2O. Put in some light energy, gives you C6H12O6, which is that glucose, plus 6O2. And remember, it's the devil's equation. It's the equation of the beast. You balance it with 666. The type of reaction, it is an endothermic reaction. And they have loads of different adaptations. They are broad, thin. They have chlorophyll inside them. They've got these veins or these blood vessels, the xylem and the phloem. They have these air spaces, the stomata, and they have guard cells. Thank you very much for watching, guys.